Hi, good afternoon. I'm Karen Young, I'm Director of Hayes Accountancy and Finance, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar today, which I hope will give you some advice about the importance of demonstrating commercial awareness at the next step of your accountancy and finance career. So thank you all for attending. While this is primarily aimed at those of you maybe about to undertake professional studies in accountancy and finance, maybe currently undertaking studies, or indeed perhaps recently qualified as an accountant, or perhaps at other stages of your career, the need for commercial awareness is indeed, to use a northern term, commercial nous. It's actually key for any aspirational accountancy or finance professional these days, and it's key also for any leader to continue to develop. By way of a brief introduction, I'm the UK Director for Hayes Accountancy and Finance, and we provide recruitment support and consultancy to hundreds of businesses across the country who need to recruit for accountancy and finance positions. For over 50 years, Hayes has been finding the best jobs for talented people like yourselves. And today, just to give you an idea of the scale of our business, we secure a job for an accountancy and finance professional every 10 minutes. We also produce a range of reports and guides to help advise your informed career decisions, such as DNA of a finance director, DNA of a credit manager, your Journey Ahead guide, and the Salary and Recruiting Trends guide, which can help you to benchmark your salary and anticipate new areas of opportunity. I'm delighted we're today joined by Freddie Grinter. Freddie is Account Director and Facilitator at Kaplan, a training organisation specialising in professional development and career progression. And Freddie will offer tips and advice about how to grow your commercial awareness, your business understanding as a finance professional, and how to demonstrate this in the workplace, in your day-to-day job, or indeed at interview. During the webinar, please do use the Q&A function to ask your questions, because we have got all the lines muted today. And I know, Freddie, I know you're on the line with me now, but I know you've got a question actually for everyone that's joined our webinar today. So if I can just pass briefly over to you for a moment, what was it that you wanted to ask?
Hello everyone, and thanks very much, Karen. I'd like you all, if possible, to write in the Q&A sidebar the first thing that comes into your mind when you hear the term commercial acumen. Don't think about it too much, the first thing that comes into your mind, and we'll pick up this later. Thanks.
Great, okay. Thank you, Freddie. So let's begin by discussing briefly what commercial awareness actually is and why it's important for your career. Headline statement that you should see in front of you. Over a third of finance directors who we questioned as part of our Hayes DNA of a Finance Director report told us that if they had to pick just one thing that helped contribute to success, that commercial awareness was the single most important attribute that a prospective finance leader of the future must possess. And likewise, in our DNA of a Partner research, 45% of partners said that if they had to pick one thing, that commercial nous, the ability to demonstrate commercial awareness, would be a major factor in the pursuit of future partnership within professional services. But what exactly is it? Well, it's difficult to define, actually, sometimes, which is why we're doing the webinar today in all its complexity. But basically, commercial awareness refers to your general knowledge of business and the workings of organisations as a whole, of how business works, particularly within the industry that you work in or the industry you perhaps are looking to join. And it includes being able to answer questions like, what are the latest developments and expected changes in the industry? What does a company need to be successful? What political, economic or social factors affect your industry? It does require research and diligence. It requires just keeping up to date with day-to-day knowledge of business on a general basis. But it is absolutely a paramount skill for accountancy and finance professionals to possess, and it's vital for anyone with ambitions of going for the top roles in finance. To demonstrate you have commercial awareness, it's important to develop your own business experiences and your work experience, and that's where Freddie's going to focus attention today. In interview terms, when you're applying externally or indeed internally for jobs, it can be specifically about how you effectively demonstrate your understanding of the industry and or the company that you are applying to join. I hope that's helped set the scene and demonstrate certainly the importance of being commercially aware. And I'll now hand over to Freddie to advise on a little bit more about the how to grow your commercial awareness and business understanding and how to demonstrate these skills in the workplace. So over to you now, Freddie.
Thanks very much, Karen. Thanks very much indeed. Commercial acumen, I think it's quite interesting from the different definitions that you've kindly written in the comment box. They're very different. Someone said business money, business savvy, business decisions, financial awareness, something accountants are lacking, which I thought was particularly interesting. So we can see from that that commercial acumen is quite a difficult term to define. But as Karen alluded to, it's very important. Over a third of finance directors view it as the most important attribute in their people. So today we're going to talk about commercial acumen, what is commercial acumen, how commercial acumen is important in the changing landscape of the accountancy profession. And also I'm hoping to give you some tips of how you can develop your commercial acumen in a practical sense in the workplace. So first I'll introduce myself. So I have over 10 years experience in the L&D sector in commercial and training facilitation roles. I've delivered programs to large corporates, universities and public sector bodies. And I've worked with clients across numerous sectors and also been fortunate to work internationally in Europe, Africa, the Middle East and Asia Pacific regions. So I used to work on the professional qualifications side of the business, but now I've moved into our beyond exam offering. So I work now for Kaplan Leadership and Professional Development. So our approach is to build behavioral confidence and technical competence to empower people to make better decisions in their working lives. So the approach we take towards this is, we call it the double helix approach. So often people tend to focus on technical competencies, passing your exams, gaining that knowledge, particularly at the start of your career when you're focusing on building this kind of specialist skill set. But often the behavioral side of development gets neglected. So later we're going to discuss why it's important to develop both strands, particularly in the light of some of the changes occurring within accountancy. So we work with clients to develop their people in various different ways. So face-to-face, more traditional training, live online training, recorded online, coaching, diagnostics, consultancy, and business simulations. But throughout our entire client base, commercial acumen is the most pressing theme. And we're going to explore a little bit more about what that means. However, before we do, I think it's important to talk about how the profession is changing and how this will impact your careers and why it's necessary to be commercially astute in this new landscape. So it's the end of the world as we know it. Well, maybe, but I think it's certainly safe to say that the accountancy profession is changing. We've identified three key pillars of this change: technology, globalization, and regulation. So the profession will face significant changes in the next 3 decades. So these three changes: evolving smart and digital technology, continued globalization of reporting and disclosure standards, and new forms of regulation. And I'd point you to look at the ACCA research on this, Drivers of Change and Future Skills. This is really kind of dissects the changes as they'll come in as we approach the year 2025. So we take the first pillar of change, technology. Accountants will increasingly use sophisticated and smart technologies to enhance traditional ways of working. And these technologies might even replace more traditional approaches. Smart software systems, including cloud computing, will support the trend towards outsourcing services, which will include more overseas outsourcing, and greater use of social media via smart technology will improve collaboration, disclosure, engagement with stakeholders, and also broader communities. Research on big data has showed that social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Google will reveal more than any corporate assurance report, and stakeholders will use digital tools to interpret big data. Now, I find that quite staggering, that the way the industry will shift from a corporate assurance report to actually using big data to gain information. Now, the big four firms, PwC, EY, KPMG, and Deloitte, are ramping up investment in technology as they seek to defend market share and as regulators take an increasingly tough stance on failures in the profession. Now, you only have to cast your mind back to the Tesco accounting scandal, and more recently Carillion, to see how important this is. So we've seen in the news last week, KPMG's audited accounts are being placed under investigation by the Financial Reporting Council. So it's really important to think about this in this context. The second pillar I want to talk about is globalization. So globalization will create more opportunities and challenges for members of the accounting profession. So while globalization encourages the free flow of money, ideas and capital from one market to another, it also means enhanced outsourcing activities and the transfer of technical and professional skills will continue to pose threats to resolving local problems with different cultures, financial environments, and tax systems. And the third pillar is increased regulation. And the associated disclosure rules will have the greatest impact on the profession for years to come. So for example, increased regulation is imminent because of tax avoidance, transfer pricing, and money laundering. And many of you will have seen the revelations in the Panama Papers in the media. Okay, so how is the profession responding to this? So we can see some views from some key people in the profession. We look at the first one from Steve Varley, the managing partner at UK at EY. We hired 650 graduates in 2010 and 1,200 in 2015. Given the rate at which technology is speeding up audit, that number could drop by 50% in 2020. So slightly pessimistic sort of view there. John Andrews, the head of technology and investments at PwC in the UK, it's becoming very clearly apparent to us that AI is going to have a huge impact on our business. Therefore, we are building stronger and stronger capability in that space. So AI, artificial intelligence, it's interesting how this will become more important. I'm sure a lot of you are too young to remember the chess grand champion Garry Kasparov playing chess against the IBM Deep Blue computer. But Deep Blue uses large-scale number crunching to calculate results. So the advances in AI are now amazing because the new system, AlphaZero, is much more intuitive and takes a more human approach by working backwards from a desired result. But it's not all bad news. We can see at the bottom from Andrew Gambier, the head of audit and assurance at ACCA, humans might be able to pick up on where things have been missed out or not reported properly. Machines will only look at what they are faced with. This may also create opportunities for the system to be gamed. So it's clear that whilst the profession is changing, human beings will very much still have a role, but the role will evolve. And it's important to consider how you can look beyond the numbers, how you can stand out from the crowd in this evolving landscape. So technical skills are not enough. It's really important that accountants can understand their organization's commercial strategy, and also people working in wider roles in finance. And it's also important that they develop their personal brand within their organizations. The ICAW say, understanding the business is a fundamental prerequisite for effective business partnering. Such understanding is gained through ongoing conversations, observation, research, and action. Action is required to gain feedback and test understanding. So it's important to act as a business partner and to be able to provide market insights to clients by understanding the wider commercial context in which your organization operates. And obviously, these are skills that certainly can't be automated. Displaying commercial savviness and applying this to daily interactions will set newly qualified accountants apart from the crowd. And at Kaplan Leadership and Professional Development, we don't just train accountants. We use diagnostics to assess an organization's commercial acumen, as well as delivering the technical side of finance and accountancy knowledge. We work with firms to build behavioral confidence in individuals by helping them build their personal brand. And I think it's really important to understand that employers are investing in this. So on your screen now, you'll see a diagnostic sheet from a large corporate client of ours. If you look at the drivers, what drives commercial behavior, growth opportunity, so understanding the market. Organizational savviness, can you prioritize stakeholders? Can you be entrepreneurial? Taking out the cost, fairly self-explanatory, but something which often can get missed. Market savviness, understanding the market, understanding your products, understanding your competitors. Financial skills, able to cross-reference data points, apply logic and understanding, and also tell a story behind the numbers, bring the numbers to life in a narrative that can be understood by internal and external stakeholders. And change, the ability to be flexible and adapt to commercial change. So how can you develop your commercial savviness? Well, what I'm going to try and do now is to give you some top tips that you can take away and hopefully use in your sort of day-to-day activities. So you can see on the board we've identified various ways to develop this savviness, but I'd just like to give you my top three, the three that we've identified as being the most important. So the top three tips: number one, develop your personal brand. Number two, read the game. And number three, be responsive to change. So let's look at those. So develop your personal brand. This is about your vision and mission. Where are you going? What do you want to be known for? So if you think on an organizational level, EY, for instance, better working world, Apple in the technology sector, denting the planet. So think about that in your own personal context. What do you want to be known for? Where are you going? The importance of developing the right behavior and the right values. Are you treating others with respect? Are you able to give insights to your clients by understanding their values? The second tip is to read the game. Okay, so reading the game, influencing senior stakeholders through a range of formal and informal networks. So often disproportionately connected individuals will be connected in comparison to status and power. So what does that mean? You might get someone who is a middle manager in an organization. You might think, well, this person can't really add too much to my network, but they might be playing golf every Sunday with the CEO. So it's about having a sort of 360 view when you're networking. These informal networks are really important. There's some research being done by an academic called Cialdini, 6 principles of influence. And one of those principles is reciprocity. So making friends before you need them, creating goodwill before you need to use it. And another thing which is really important when reading the game is to come across as genuine. People can spot a fake from a mile off. So when you're engaging with people, have warmth in your attitude and appear well-intentioned, volunteer for projects, and your competence, which you'll be building at the start of your career, in many ways takes a backseat to your behavioral confidence. So do you have a warm presence? Do you have charisma? Do you respond to situations in a positive way? This is all key to your success, particularly as you're starting your career. And the third tip I would give is being responsive to change. So understanding how organizations change. We talked about it earlier in the context of technological developments, globalization, and regulatory changes that are affecting the industry. But also you can take this on a personal level, so having a flexible approach to work, adding to your skill set throughout your career, understanding the importance of training and development, not just passing your exams and then thinking you're there, really lifelong learning, developing yourself at every stage in your career. So the journey to being a successful accountant doesn't stop when you qualify. In fact, that's just when it starts. So I'd like to thank you for listening today, and hopefully that's provided you with some insights on commercial acumen. And now I'd like to pass back to Karen.
Great, thank you, Freddie. Okay, thank you for your insights. As Freddie's already said, commercial awareness is indeed a foundation for a finance career, but also will certainly help advance your career in the future in whichever area you choose. And to that end, again, predominantly with those of you that are studying, thinking about studying, recently qualified in mind, to just have a look at some of the different career paths that are open to you. But actually, they're very relevant whether you're at a different stage in your career and have joined the webinar and are just considering what are the options to me available in different sectors and kind of, what would I get from working in different sectors as well. So let's have a look at these now. You might be interested in pursuing a career in commerce and industry in the private sector and thinking, well, how does the work that I would carry out in a small or medium-sized enterprise or business contrast to what I might expect to get in a large company or multinational business? So within the larger multinational companies, I think the finance functions enjoy significant influence, and the data, the insight that's provided from accountancy and finance professionals will provide CEOs and CFOs and the C-suite with the data-driven intelligence they need to make strategic decisions. It can be very defined and clear career direction, very structured, with the opportunity to develop those kind of formal and informal networks that Freddie's just mentioned, and to be able to quite clearly plot out your career path, or at least have actually quite increased visibility of where you could go. I quite like the look of that team. Maybe I could go there in the future. What are the skill sets that I need to be able to get there? And certainly exposure to senior management and industry leaders, and to develop your reputation, that personal brand piece again as a trusted business partner. And of course, in the largest organisations, many of these jobs these days could include an international remit, so opportunity for those of you that are interested to look at travel or overseas secondments or even relocations. But if you're quite an agile thinker, you've got a hands-on approach, and you think you like working with entrepreneurs, maybe there's a lot of entrepreneurs in your family, then you might enjoy a job in a growing SME. And many successful and fast-growing startups and small businesses are run by really energetic, ambitious, passionate entrepreneurs who value the finance and business knowledge of like-minded professionals. And actually, in that environment, it can be the case that as the finance leader that you become, you are that trusted advisor, and actually it is really just down to you to provide that insight to a business person in terms of the direction that they take their business in. So it can give you really great experience of actually growing a business, making fast decisions and genuine decision-making opportunities actually, and to see kind of ideas and recommendations that you make actioned quite swiftly and decisively. That's not to say that can't happen in big business as well. Whether you're interested in working in an SME or a large corporate multinational, commerce and industry, private sector, whichever way you term it, great way to grow your experiences and achieve your long-term ambitions. So what about internal audit? So it's like that unsung hero of a career in finance, I always like to say. And I've recruited in finance for nearly 22 years in the UK, and I've always said internal audit for me at a certain point in a career can be kind of a bridging role between leaving the world of audit and going into sometimes a large multinational organisation, getting onto those clear defined career paths and seeing what could be ahead of you, which teams and departments you might like to work in. So if some of you are on the webinar and you've been working in external audit, some of you might be feeling that you want to move away from it, and I get that. But whilst there's obviously some shared characteristics, external and internal audit, they are very different roles. If you look at the successful finance directors and CFOs in FTSE 100, FTSE 250 listed businesses, a lot of them have worked in internal audit at some point in their careers, and it's long been recognised as a direct route into major blue-chip businesses. And working here, internal auditors these days act as proactive, consultative business partners. Yes, you're auditing, but you're making recommendations, and then you're going back to see if those recommendations have been made. So you are contributing and collaborating on the ongoing success of a business. If you look at internal audit in financial services, for example, then lots of different career paths open up there as well. So senior roles within mainstream finance, business-facing roles, and of course more senior positions within the internal audit function. So it can open doors. It's enjoyable to do. It can be travel if that's what you want, and it can present with exciting opportunities to further progress your career. So I think in our ever-changing world, there's also constant changes that mean new and exciting opportunities open up around all sorts of IT audit, cybercrime, who knows what else in the future. So I really do feel that internal audit, unsung career path, lots of merits, and you can be really at the forefront of minimising risk in your organisation. That's a snapshot of looking at internal audit. So the city and financial services, well, for many newly qualified professionals working as an accountant in the city, now it doesn't have to be London these days, it's still a kind of aspirational career destination, and I don't suppose that will ever change. The competition's fierce for work in investment and boutique banks, asset management companies, also insurers and life companies, private equity firms, VC, venture capital houses and hedge funds. And the bar for working in these environments has always been set high. So the typical things around exemplary records in your professional exams and your industry knowledge and your personal brand and credibility with senior colleagues and clients is really key. The kind of technical experience, a little bit like Freddie said, it's taken as a given. The benefits of working in the city are plenty. The pay is one of them. But it does extend beyond the pay. So if you're kind of looking at that but thinking I do want a stronger work-life balance, sometimes the career in retail banking, in finance for retail banking could suit. As a newly qualified accountant there, you'd get exposure to senior stakeholders, working on challenging projects, and be given responsibility and autonomy. And I think it's quite consumer-facing in terms of a career, and there's lots of opportunities usually to move internally between different business lines, for example. Investment banking, still one of the most sought-after career paths in the city. Competitive business, really good compensation structure, very meritocratic, if you like, that type of environment. And organisations here are pretty good for people that want a challenging, certainly international or global career, who already kind of get and like and are up to date with the complex nature of investment banking products. And you do need to be confident or develop confidence of operating in a fast-paced, high-performance office culture. So investment management for someone that's looking for that kind of vibrant culture could be the one for you. And this, of course, encompasses hedge funds, PE firms, private wealth managers, custodians, so lots of all of those offering professional management of securities and assets to achieve goals set by investors. So the services are very similar to, of course, investment banks, but generally with the investment management companies, there's a slightly different culture, maybe more opportunity to drive a better work-life balance, and probably a more intimate operation away from the sort of corporate behaviours of the big banking institutions. But fantastic places to learn operations of financial markets and gaining insight into the complexities of financial products and benefiting from that workplace culture that I mentioned. And front office, it's undoubtedly a sought-after career path. If you look at the income possibilities with the career prospects that arise from advising corporates, it's no surprise that a lot of chartered accountants in particular look to pursue a career in this area. Again, strong credentials, strong technical experience needed, but needing to show that you're motivated, ambitious, quite a competitive nature, and definitely with the kind of business acumen, commercial acumen piece, I think it's really important here that you demonstrate that interest in financial markets. So if kind of long-term you're thinking, yeah, I want to be a corporate financier or an investment banker, an entry-level job in front office is probably where you should be thinking. It is demanding. The hours are long, usually. It does require lots of energy and drive and achieving goals, but the rewards are good, income one of them, but sometimes it's just the cut of the chase, the thrill of operating in that type of arena. And now not least to professional services. So the career opportunities that open up as the result of a career founded and developed in a Big Four or top 10 or any of the large accounting firms are well charted, and I don't think I need to go into too much detail in them, but the many different areas there in which you can specialise and develop in and build your expertise. And actually, in my view, and a little bit like Freddie's mentioned, the new areas that are opening up and will become lines of business in the future, I don't think we can plot that out fully, but that's where the anticipating what's happening in the world of work, in the world of business is really, really important. A lot of mid-tier and independent firms are tasked with probably quite different assignments outside of traditional service offerings. So if you want to build your career outside of the Big Four at some point, it is worth considering the niche boutique firms. While by definition they're smaller often, many of the most successful have been set up, again, by these entrepreneurial finance professionals who've had large firm training in the background, and so it can be a chance to really continue to develop this stream of commerciality and business acumen. So you could specialise in corporate finance, further build your technical, your client-facing skills, and enjoy kind of really clear career advancements as well. Whatever size of firm, professional services in the career here, it's going to develop communication skills. It has to. It's going to develop commercial acumen. It's going to enable you to establish those strong working relationships and build your formal and informal networks. I think that's really key, and lots of opportunities here to grow and develop and enhance your career. The world of taxation, well, I think, certainly my comment on it would be that it's very rare that tax is not in the news of various different forms, but tax in today's business world calls for powerful analytical skills, it calls for lateral thinking, it calls for an anticipatory problem-solving mindset, and it will be varied. Lots of opportunities to develop advisory and consultative skills whilst working with senior stakeholders. Advising clients on tax legislation, keeping up to date with ever-changing tax laws and the intricacies of complicated legislation, and usually very clear career progression, actually, and obviously as seniority increases, chance to specialise in all sorts of niche areas, corporate, national insurance or personal tax, just to name a few. Probably increasingly when you look at tax in-house in an organisation, in a company, does tend to offer international remits and opportunities to learn about managing tax in different jurisdictions. And the world of treasury, so this has certainly come far more to the fore in my kind of career and experience over recent years. Real opportunity to work at the heart of an organisation, providing valuable support to all key functions, and seeing quite a few qualified accountants then go on to develop treasury as a particular skill set and specialise in it, and then go on and do things like the ACT exams. At a senior level role, it's developed into a really corporate role, financial and risk management, liquidity management, funding, insurance, investor relations, even global supply chain and pricing. So I think whether it's a technical treasury reporting role or it's more along the cash forecasting or data analysis side, you really will put commercial acumen to the fore here within financial and risk management and global supply chain and pricing. So lots of different opportunities, consultancy type roles within the Big Four and some of the smaller advisory firms, and that's where, whichever that is, you'll get exposure to influential companies and indeed some of the largest companies in the UK, working really closely with a kind of open door policy these days to finance directors and CFOs of businesses that are in constant change and always looking about, well, okay, great if we have the cash in the bank, but what are we actually doing with that to make it more effective? And just coming to the close of this sort of whistle-stop tour of the doors that can open for you, the public and not-for-profit sector. So finance professionals enjoy some excellent roles in public services and not-for-profit organisations. And for me, These are jobs where you can often develop strategic skills and an opportunity to get involved strategically with an organisation, sometimes faster than in the private sector. That's just my view. You know, influencing decisions that impact on things like major service delivery of our critical services, looking at social objective strategies, and I say regardless of the economic climate, but you know, we all know these key services need to be provided. So first-class resources and technologies, there's always exciting project work and chance to input on strategies that ultimately determine how really substantial budgets should be invested. So if you are looking for a career path where you'll get satisfaction from the knowledge the work you're carrying out will contribute either directly or indirectly to the lives of wider society, this is a really interesting area to explore, and there are lots of opportunities out there just now, and a very sort of proactive, supportive approach usually to training and learning, and that of course in itself opens up the opportunities to develop transferable skills. So I'm sorry that was a little bit whistle-stop, but it does enable you that if you've got your interest piqued on a particular sector there, that do feel free to get in touch. And I do have a profile on LinkedIn. It's Karen Young. If any of you want to seek me out and ask any direct questions, I'm always really happy to help with some career advice and career planning on a one-to-one basis. And on that note, I'd like to thank you for attending today. We'll now take some questions, either for Freddie or myself or both of us. If we don't manage to answer all your questions, I do apologise for that today. We'll try and take some of the key ones, and we will ensure that we come back to you directly post the webinar over the next couple of days if we don't manage to come to yours specifically. So, Freddie, can I just check you're back on audio on the line so you can answer some questions?
I am indeed, yep.
Great, good. Okay, well, we're doing all right for time. Oh, gosh, here's one that kind of relates to some of your content, actually, Freddie, so I'll pass this one to you. Do you think accountants will all be replaced by robots in the next 50 years? That's
I certainly hope not. I mean, I think, as I mentioned, there are some fundamental changes happening to the profession. But I think as the quote we had from the ACCA, I mean, humans will still definitely have a role to play. It's just that it will be a role about having a more holistic view of an organization's commercial strategy. It'll be less about sort of processes and number crunching. It'll be more about adding value to clients by providing market savvy advice.
Yeah, okay. Great, and I think just to add my take on that, I speak and present at a number of face-to-face events, and I recall a careers evening aimed at newly qualified accountants up to about 3 years post-qualified, not that long ago, and the challenge was exactly this, that an individual had been along to another conference a week or so before and said, oh my goodness, I've spent all this time and finances, training, qualifying to be an accountant, and I've just been to this conference, and robots are going to take our jobs. And we did have quite a wide discussion on it on a panel basis. And my view is very strongly that the jobs content will change. The paramount skill sets remain the same, but we all have to adapt and we all have to anticipate. And gosh, big data's been around a while now, but I know as a director in business, I could drown in the data that I can get out of our systems these days, literally drown in it. So I look to our finance business partners and management accountants to help me to kind of work out what the heck is happening in that data. And I don't want the whole report and spreadsheet, and a robot could press a button and produce that. I want the human touch, kind of, right, give me a one-page analysis to help me steer my way through this. What are we seeing, and what key 2 recommendations would you recommend to me that could have an impact on my business tomorrow or in 3 months or in 5 years? So I think that analysis piece is really key.
I'd agree, Karen. I think the thing feedback we're getting from a lot of clients is that there's so much data out there. It's, can you sift it? Can you find the right information, and can you present it in a way that's relevant in your interactions? And I think it can be a bit of a minefield. People talk about big data and they think it's maybe a silver bullet, but it's absolutely not. The data is only as good as the person who's analysing it and presenting it.
Okay, good. I don't have actually the specific answer to this, and I'm apologies for putting you on the spot, Freddie, but there's a question here that kind of links directly to that. Which big data analysis programs are being most used in finance? Just in your role, do you have any visibility of that?
I mean, in my current role, less so, but previously I used to manage a client relationship with Deloitte, and I know that they're investing heavily in their big data. And there's a report that I can maybe share with you after the session about the kind of the futures and their approach to big data and how it should be analyzed. So I can certainly share that with you after the session.
Okay. And I think just on that note, when we come to the close, just keep an eye out for some of the Hays social links that I'll share, because Freddie and I are both members of a group called Hays Future of Finance, and we're on LinkedIn, and I also have run a group on Facebook, so we could certainly share some of these resources now and on an ongoing basis on those if you're interested. Picking up on another here, someone said they're struggling to see where they would add value as an accountant or business partner. And I think it's because the people that they are partnering with and supporting, e.g. me in my example, I suppose, would be already viewing the data that you would be providing in the meeting. So where's the value add? I don't know whether you typed that before. I sort of gave my little example for the person that asked that question. But for me, I'm not an accountant, and I haven't been trained formally with professional qualifications. And numbers sometimes to me, if someone gives me a load of data, I just can't see for looking. It's like the wood and the trees, saying. So I'm looking for kind of, one-page insight with this is what's happening, this is possibly the reason why, but that's over to you, to the business person, to say, do you think that's the case? And then it enables a discussion around it, but that probably as a business partner, you've maybe already identified that perhaps you could solve that by tweaking your margin pricing, and that would have this end result because you're speculating with a what-if scenario of a recommendation and the impact that that could have on the business. But yes, then it's ultimately down to that director or senior business person to go, okay, understand that, I get it now, quite like your two recommendations, we're going to go ahead with this one. And ultimately that decision-making process still lies with the operational part of the business, but it's informed decision-making, and that's the difference for me, personally. Again, Freddie, I don't know whether you'd comment any more on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, what you're looking to do is to make the decision-making process of your key stakeholders as easy as possible. So it's almost trying to have a systematic way of, if you like, building an argument. So yeah, I mean, I think I'd certainly echo that viewpoint.
Okay. One here around someone who said they're working currently as a finance analyst, actually, but it's not really working out so well, and it's more sort of sales ledger orientated, and that if they're looking to make some changes now, they might quite fancy joining the world of joining an accountancy firm, or possibly even specialising in audit or taxation. And the word is, of course, how can I do that? It's a little difficult in these scenarios without kind of knowing a bit more about sort of background and training and qualifications. But I think for me, I'd be interested in Freddie's view. I'm not saying it's an easy move to be able to do that from a financial analyst position that is more of a sales ledger role and straight into an audit or tax role. But you just need to start to look at some research. The benefit of living in today's world is that every type of job and person specification is on the World Wide Web. And that's the luxury of our kind of just constant access to real-time information. So looking at the skills that are required on the person specification, sort of technical skills will be largely taken as a bit of a given. So then what are the competencies? I hate the word soft skills. I will probably use it at some point in the next 10 minutes. But what are the competencies that they're looking for, and how many of those do you have? And my advice always to employers when they're recruiting is, why on earth are you looking to try and meet 100% of the list, the wish list you've got on your job description? You're looking for someone to develop, and in order for someone to be able to do this job and do it well and come along the journey with you, you should be looking at, has that person got 60, 70, possibly 80% of the things that I need? What can I be flexible on? So it does give you a chance, even if you've got some gap analysis between what you're doing now and what you think you might want to do, to work out where the gaps are, but more importantly from a positive perspective, work out where you've got commonalities of skills and competencies, and bring those to the fore. But I'm really happy if that particular individual wants to connect with me on LinkedIn and obviously chat with me individually. Any view on that, Freddie, from a financial analyst to audit and tax? Top tip?
I would say certainly spend some time on the professional institutes websites, because as well as this kind of technical skills, they've also got a lot of thought leadership pieces there, and which will give you a bit of an insight as to what it's actually like to do the jobs and what kind of sort of behavioural skills and competencies you'll need in order to do them well. So I would certainly advise doing that.
Yeah. Another question here, is it worth sticking to finance courses before looking at moving on to a career choice? Currently working in finance for a small limited company, recently finished studying AAT level 2. So I am sort of second guessing, but I think the question is probably around, you know, do you get your AAT covered off and stay in the small limited company before thinking about whether you go on possibly to study a different qualification, e.g. ACCA, CIMA, or a CA or ACA course. I think that's where we're going with that. I think, again, it depends on the situation. You'd be quite capable, if you really want to make the move whenever you want to move it, to look at the skills that you've got. Again, my sort of advice stands of looking at job descriptions and person specifications and looking at the skills that you've got and kind of where you want to be heading. And if you've got less than 50% of what's needed, that's when you need to perhaps think about staying for a little while and working out a plan on how you manage to develop those skills in your current organisation until you get to a 60, 70, 80% match with the jobs that you think you'd like to go for. That would be my advice, but again, happy to pick up on a one-to-one basis, because sometimes it's easier knowing the background and being able to see sort of resumes and CVs. Any view on that? That's kind of your territory completely, Freddie, around, you know, AAT and going on to different courses and skill sets.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things I would say is if you're actually learning in your current role, take the time to kind of maximise that as much as possible and talk to people within your organisation. I mean, you're working for a small company, so maybe it's easier to kind of get some exposure to some more senior people. And I think you can be fairly transparent. I mean, you know, you can say that you're looking at your future options, and you know you're building your skill sets with your AAT, and just ask for advice. And then when you kind of take that advice on board, think about it, and you know, take the time to think about where you want to go. Don't rush into it. It seems like you're in the kind of place now where you could actually learn quite a lot. So I guess I would consider sort of sticking with what you're doing, but then keeping your radar open and getting as much insight from those around you as you can. Okay, great, thank you.
What are our views on pursuing contracting roles as a career? I mean, if I look back to 1996, my early years of recruiting in finance and accountancy in the UK were actually spent helping people with finding temporary and contract work. So it's a subject close to my heart, and I think it's absolutely got its merits. I think the different business experiences that you gain, you obviously gain in a shorter period of time sometimes exposure to just more organisations, whatever sector they're in, whether that's banks, public services, charities, private sector, SME, blue chip, professional services firms. You just sort of see and hear more. And I mean, this is the crux of commercial acumen, is how do you take all of your business and personal and work experiences and actually become savvy from it? And so I think there's some great things to be learned. You learn different systems, and you learn to be pretty agile and think on your feet, and to go in and get sort of almost faster at working out what the crux of a problem or an opportunity is for a business. So it is pretty good. And I think, you know, again, there were challenges probably in the late 1990s and 2000s around perception of that, and that employers might go, well, you know, all they've been doing is temping for 3 years. I think it's viewed very differently these days because of business, and, you know, it is a choice. Whereas I think, you know, I can speak from experience. 20 years ago, you know, people saw it as I'm temping whilst I look for a permanent job. I think the great thing is now that there's the opportunity there to choose it. So that's my personal view. Freddie?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the world of work is very, very much changing. The days of entering one organization for your whole career is a thing of the past. We've all heard in the news about the gig economy and what have you. So I would very much say, it's certainly not stigmatized in any way. I would just say, if you're looking at that kind of more short-term contract, short-term work, just make sure that it kind of adds to the narrative of your career and where you want to go, and then it contributes to that, and that you can show what you've learned from it. Because often it's not the length of time that you're at a place; it's actually what you've done and the projects you've worked on whilst you were there.
Okay. Okay, I'll do time for one more question. There's a couple of people that have responded to our responses, so please do bear with us, and we will engage with you directly on those as I promised. But I thought this is probably an interesting one to finish. Could you advise typically what would a finance analyst move into? What role would a finance analyst move into? E.g., people feel that if you're a financial controller or finance manager, that you could move into a future finance director role. Do you know what? There's not a thing that, whilst there are a sort of typical routes, there's no kind of absolutely given thing that if you don't do this, you won't get to X. In terms of job title, I'm a firm believer of that. My view more is here around, if you look at, I suppose, financial accounting and the balance sheet focused roles versus management accounting and profit and loss versus, type of positions, is can you make it all the way to be finance director or CFO if you have worked in financial analysis, done more of the P&L and the management accounting and the sort of business partner roles, but haven't ever had responsibility for the balance sheet? You can, but it will be more challenging to prove your worth through an interview process. Likewise, if you've run group accounting and balance sheet and have spent all your time doing those type of roles and you haven't partnered operationally with a business and worked more obviously on that side and developed that skill set, again, you could do it, but you may need to just work harder at proving that through an interview process. So it's much more about the skill set from a technical perspective, and then the skill sets that employers tell us all the time. In our latest salary guide, 75% of employers said, I haven't got the skills needed to get my business to where it needs to be. And the technical skills that, anyone that's hiring will say, Karen, I take the technical competence as a given. If someone's committed to completing their professional qualifications, or they're qualified, or they're qualified by the experience, it's these different things I'm looking for. And what people are telling us when we go out and talk to them and when we survey is actually it's management and leadership, it's communication skills, it is IT and data and analytical skills that you need to be looking at developing. So kind of forget the job title bit and think more about the skill sets and getting enough experience in both of those areas. That for me is how you build your toolkit, if you like, to be able to get to a future finance director role. And the same would apply to a future partner in professional services, just a slightly different set of technical skills in the toolbox that you need to develop.
And I would echo that, Karen, because we see often, we do a lot of work with sort of C-suite individuals, senior people who maybe haven't had the time or the inclination to develop their behavioural skills, and it does become very, very important, particularly when you get up to the level of heading up a department. So I think that's absolutely right.
Yeah, good. Apologies if we haven't managed to get to all. I do just want to reference, I think, a response back from someone around, I think, the discussion around the contracting and temporary piece, which is if it's fine for the career, great, but how do you make kind of long-term commitment for things like mortgages if you are obviously in the contracting or temping world? Look, I don't have a magic solution to that. I appreciate it's tough sometimes out in the real world, trying to prove obviously what your earnings are and what they could be and what they will be for things like that, and that's where, outside of this conversation, for routes like that, some things need to be evaluated and potentially changed, because I think the world of work will change significantly, and we know people are spending, even in permanent positions, people are spending less time in jobs. They're moving on a more cyclical basis. Used to be, for me, 5, 6, 7 years was kind of the common time in an organisation, and now we're seeing, it can be 18, 12, 18, 24 months. So I think I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's a consistency of you go in and kind of it's building your networks in those sectors. And then looking at how you represent the contracting work that you've done on your CV, so it's very achievement-driven, and people can see the commerciality that you will bring, and with your network wide, and talking to some trusted partners in the recruitment industry and outside the recruitment industry to build your networks there. Good. Okay, Freddie. Any sort of final closing comments? And I think you're going to direct people to a couple of resources that you've got available at Kaplan.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you can see on the slide there's a link to a kind of YouTube video which talks about our perspective on commercial acumen and some of the diagnostic works we've done. It's just a short 2 or 3 minute video, but that might be a sort of good entry point. And there's also the link below will take you onto our insights page where there's some thought leadership which you can access. And just kind of picking up on that last point, I would say, it can be quite scary thinking about long-term financial commitments such as mortgages or whatever with an uncertain job market. But whatever you're doing, whatever the role is, if you can try and build it into your kind of personal brand, your personal narrative, so you can show how you've kind of added value in all the experiences you've had, and have a direction as to where you're going. And if you can speak to potential employers and tell the story of your experience rather than just listing skills, I think that will be much more compelling. Great, thank you, Freddie. On that note, we've also got some resources at Hays that you might find interesting. So as you can see on the screen in front of you, we do have a sort of summary of some of the sections that I covered earlier around career routes. It does say for newly qualified accountants, but it's just a generally useful document about the pros and cons of different sectors. And you can see, obviously, our social feeds there. I mentioned the Hays Future Finance Forum LinkedIn group, and also we do have a Hays Accountancy and Finance Facebook page. And what we will do is, I think, Freddie, if you're okay, certainly on the LinkedIn group, we can share the links to the videos there that you've mentioned, so people can have access to them. So just if you'd like to join that group, please do. Absolutely, yep.
Great, good. And I think just, in summary, I think it came to a close quite nicely there. Freddie's talked about narrative there. This has been a bit of a jump into commercial awareness. I hope you've taken some top tips away from Freddie. I found that particularly interesting. But what we will plan to do, I think, is on a really practical level, particularly given some of your questions, we'll be looking to put in a follow-up session where we'll look at sort of more practical tools of some examples of how you would demonstrate good commercial acumen on a CV, and look at some potential interview questions that get thrown at you every day, whether you're going for an internal or an external job, and look at some example responses and how you might deal with those, because I think that is about helping you personally to build your narrative and to build that personal brand that came up as one of the top 3 segments on one of Freddie's slides. So we'll keep you informed with that. Do look out for that. Probably run it, I think, around April, May time, and that will have some real practical examples and advice for you on building your CV and demonstrating commercial acumen at an interview process for either an internal or external job. So thank you very much for joining, and I'd like to again extend my thanks to Freddie for your expert and valued tips. Thank you all, and have a good afternoon. Goodbye.